Hi, in today's video I want to explore some lines in the Italian game that I think are interesting. And specifically it started with a friend of mine sending me a game saying I finally pulled off the fried liver attack. And his game went like this. He opens with e4, black plays e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop c4, the typical Italian game. To which the opponent replied with bishop c5, pawn to d3. And when the opponent played knight to f6, he went with the knight attack on g5. And when opponent thought that a good defense would be pawn to d5, capture on d5, knight to d5. This is where my friend sacrificed his knight on f7, forking the queen and the rook. This is an idea of the fried liver attack. King captures on f7, and it's followed up by queen to f3, forking both the knight and the king. And here black played the terrible move king to g8, which was followed by a check, bishop takes d5 check. Now you could recapture, but I don't think it's going to make a big difference. Trying not to capture with the queen because this bishop is protected by its own queen. Black thought that interposing a bishop on e6 would be enough, except this is a mate in 1 and checkmate in 10 moves. Beautiful attack by white, really well executed. Now, just to be clear, instead of playing e6, black could have captured with the queen, would have been a check, and probably, black is losing a bishop on top of it either way. So if he goes here, he loses this bishop with check. If instead he interposes the bishop, he loses this bishop with check. So either way, a terrible position for black, but could have delayed the checkmate, let's say. Now, what is interesting to me is that this is not a typical fried liver. And if you look at the chess.com analysis, they don't call it the fried liver attack. And the reason is simple. It's because of the presence of this bishop here that actually changes the perspective, and that gives black many more options, defensive options in these positions that the opponent could have maybe taken advantage of. And in order to explore a little bit of these ideas, I want to present the fried liver, present the ideas behind the fried liver, and we're going to explore them from the point of view of black, just to make sure that we can see what kind of defensive options goes in place. So the game starts with an Italian game. This is something that is always the start here. From this position, once white plays bishop to c4, we are in the Italian game. And there are two main defenses that black can use. One is the bishop to c5, which is called the gioco piano. The other one is bishop to knight to f6, the two knights defense. It is very important to note that the fried liver attack only occurs when black plays the knight to f6, two knights defense. In this point, this is where white can unleash the attack on g5. And there we can see the normal variation. The only defensive move, the only acceptable defensive move is pawn to d5. And after the exchange, if black makes the mistake of recapturing with the knight, the sacrifice on f7 can happen. And when the queen comes to f3, a big dangerous mistake was retreating to g8 in the case. What is preferable to move now, it's to go to e6. This way you provide an extra defender to this knight, and therefore black cannot recapture as easily. White cannot recapture as easily. But this being said, it's still a very bad position for black, because after the move knight to c3, adding an extra pressure on this knight, black is in a terrible position. The king is completely exposed in the center of the game. It is important to understand that black isn't completely losing, in the sense of, now with the era of computers, we know that with perfect play, black may get out of it okay. But in practical terms, when humans are playing, this is such a difficult position for black. The potential for mistakes is very high, and therefore black tend to avoid entering in these positions. Instead, there are two things that black can do here. So, commonly thought of, the mistake is to recapture here on d5 with the knight. Instead, what is much more common is what is referred to as the Polario defense, playing knight to a5, pressuring this bishop. And the bishop right now is not looking at f7, so a jump by the knight on f7 is useless. And if they were to move the pawn away, they would lose their bishop. Therefore, the only, or the main, most common continuation here is to give a check. After pawn to c6, an exchange occurs, and from here you cannot recapture because it's protected by the knight, and the pawn and the bishop retreats either to e2, d3. I'm not always sure where, but one of these two squares. This is playable by by black. This is again an even game. Usually this defense is solid enough for black that it deters white from playing the fried liver or attempting the fried liver attack. Another defense that is common is when white plays knight to g5, is to play bishop to c5, the infamous Traxler counterattack. An amazing line, very complicated, and just to give you some idea, the idea behind the Traxler here, it's this bishop is eyeing f2, and it's baiting you to say, hey, you're giving me the fork for free. I'm getting a rook. Except you just got an in-between move with this sacrifice on f2 that can be followed with another check with the knight. And here it becomes so difficult because the queen can also come into play, making it very harsh. For instance, this is a checkmate here, right? Like this is very dangerous. It allows for a very quick counterattack, and it all starts with this bishop here that gets sacrificed on f2. Another thing to note that is very important is, like, once the bishop is out, and this is the main difference, castling becomes possible. And now let's look at the game that my friend played, where after bishop to c4, black didn't go into the two knights defense, instead went for the gioco piano, the bishop to c5. Bishop to c5 leads to more positional type of games, especially after this d3 move called the gioco pianissimo. From here, after knight to f6, when white plays knight to g5, the move castling short can be devastating for white. Not devastating, not in the sense that it's losing, but in the sense that white just lost all the initiative, is went from playing slightly ahead to playing slightly from behind. Look at this position. In this position, what do both players want to do? They want to develop towards the center, they want to develop minor pieces, and they want to castle. White has developed 2 pieces and hasn't castled. Black has developed 3 pieces and has castled. All of a sudden, black has an advantage in development, and white doesn't have a serious attack to transform. This notion that if the castling is possible, then the knight to g5 is a bit premature. It's a bit too easy to deal with. But even let's assume our guy didn't notice that castling would be the best idea and went for the same idea as he has seen in the fried liver. Maybe he's just seen the fried liver, seen a video about it, and he knows that d5 is what you should play here, right? And after capture, and even not to mention that this is also still valid, kind of like the Polario defense, but it's a slightly different one because now this bishop is protected by d3. So if you were to play something like this would be an exchange and not a loss anymore. But let's say that you even went for this wrong knight recapture on d5. At this stage, in the supposedly sacrifice on f7, it's still not a fried liver attack, for the main reason that this bishop is available, kind of like a Traxler defense, and the castling is still possible. So it's not exactly a Traxler defense. Usually in the Traxler, this knight would be on f6, not on d5, and this pawn would not be on d3. So in a way, this is a position that can be reached from the actual Traxler if, looking at the Traxler, white decides, and it has happened, white decides that I don't want to go into the intricacies of sacrificing on f7. This Traxler attack is way too dangerous. I've seen what it can do. You know, right? This Traxler attack, very dangerous. I want to avoid this. Now, the proper way to avoid it, the way that masters would avoid it, is to give a check, get a pawn, remove the castling privileges from white, and get out. You got a little bit of advantage. You got a pawn. You made them incapable of castling, and you get out. It's still playable. Another way, which isn't that great, is this playing to d3. And I've seen in the chess database, you can look at it here to the right, the openings. This is a position that has been reached. Actually, it says 1, but it has been reached 3 times. And exactly because this castling position makes it so much better for black, right? Castling, even at this stage, like we saw before, only two pieces out, uncastled, versus 3 pieces out and castled. Black is advanced. But let's say black doesn't even want to castle. So we looked at this, this. And from here, should white still decide to sacrifice on f7, black isn't forced to recapture. They have this bishop on c5 that can go on f2 and give a check. And if white decides to recapture, actually, like this is a pretty difficult position for white because several moves are very weak and dangerous. Like for instance, if you recapture, castling, again, this power of castling completely protects the queen because of the pin on the knight, and it's going to be very difficult to unpin this knight. And look at all the initiative that black has with these 2 central knights, with open diagonals here and here, and with the fact that white doesn't have easy development for their pieces. Their pieces are still in the back rank. Look at this bishop. This bishop cannot go almost anywhere. The bishop is going to have a terrible time finding a way, finding a good placement to participate in the attack. So it's not, you cannot recapture. Going here is also something where all of a sudden the knights get activated, and good luck dealing with this attack here and the queen is coming soon to participate as well. So the only acceptable defense that black has is to go here, and it still doesn't completely prevent castling. Now you don't want to castle immediately because you would lose a queen, right? Like, this is not what you can do. But even playing something like queen to f6, you don't have to recapture this knight, is basically what I'm saying. And if you were to make the mistake of, say, capturing here, there are so many things that black can do, like with a discovered check that is going to come, with some of the forking that can happen. Like say something like this, right? Like, I'm not sure this was the best move, but the point is, I would not be happy in this position as white. And clearly, you may be up material, you may have gotten a rook, but this is not the type of position that you were hoping to play, with so much initiative on black's board versus so little initiative with pieces in the back rank. These pieces are not participating in the fight in any time soon. Like, this is going to be very difficult, and we have a discovered check, we have an activated queen. Not an easy position. So the point I'm trying to make is that once this bishop comes out, whether it is from the Traxler or from the Gioco Piano, and particularly in the game that we looked at, in the Gioco Piano, the bishop came out. Castling became possible, and therefore it's not a fried liver attack anymore, and therefore it's not as powerful. This is not a powerful position. This is met very easily with castling. So you don't want to give your opponent this opportunity. Part of the beauty of the fried liver attack is that if your opponent knows how to defend against it, you're still keeping initiative, you're still keeping a good position. You wouldn't go for a play that can be easily turned against you. So this is why I really recommend paying attention to this bishop movement before deciding to jump into a knight to g5 and potential knight sacrifice. The last thing I want to show you is something that happened from this position in an old game by Greco, one of my favorite players. Now, Greco is a really old player, and by today's standard is considered weak, especially his opponents are considered extremely weak, and there's a very good case to be made that a lot of the games that we know of him may have been constructions that he's written about to illustrate some points rather than actual games. But his games are always super fun because we see a lot of natural looking moves and how he can make you pay for them. So for instance, in this position, this is a slightly different position than what he has studied. What he was studied was actually here, from here. He starts with c3. I'm not going to go over the difference between playing c3 and d3 in the Italian, but very often both get played, especially today. And here, from this position, this is a position that Greco has actually studied. He shows the danger of having your king like this, and he shows how actually being uncastled can be turned out to your advantage. He's going to take advantage of this position, and turn into a pretty devastating attack. Black tries to kick the knight out. White replies, I don't care, take my knight. Sacrificing the knight effectively, but after white recaptures the pawn on g5, pressuring the knight, black has to realize that his knight has no good places to go. And almost all of the squares where he can go, other than e8, are already under attack. Like most beginners, black decides that moving the knight back to e8 is probably a bad idea. However, if I move the knight to h7, it is going to be defended by the king, and then it cannot really be captured. And that's what black does. Knight to h7. Except here, there's one killer move found by Greco, that Yeah, if you want to pause and try to look for this move, be my guest. I hinted at it already, and it's queen to h5. Queen to h5 now threatens checkmate on queen to h7. So clearly, if this is what black plays, if black doesn't address it, this is mate in one. So now black has to address this. In Greco's game, Greco says black resigns because there is no way out. But let's think a little bit about it. From this position, the only thing that black can do is either protect h7 or give the king an escape square. Now there is no easy way, actually there is no way to protect h7 unless you move the knight to f6, protecting h7. However, queen to h8 is the exact same checkmate, and this one is not protected. So the only solution you have is to move the rook to e8, like this. If queen to h7 is taken, king has an escape square on f8, and from here the queen has no really good way of delivering checkmate. I would say what you would play here is queen to h8, then you escape, and then you take queen to g7. Now white is still having a massive lead and going to destroy one side of black's play, but white should not be trying to destroy the opponent. White should be trying to deliver checkmate. And again, if you want to try to figure out how to deliver the checkmate, it's actually a pretty cute combination here. I will give it, like, I will suggest that you pause and think about it. I'm gonna give the answer in 3, 2, 1. Now look at this really cool checkmate pattern. Queen to f7, protected by the bishop. The only legal move is king to h8. And from here, the beautiful, absolutely crazy rook sacrifice in h7. Again, this is a forced move, no other legal move. And queen to h5, checkmate. Okay, now El Greco games usually are filled with mistakes that the opponents can make, and obviously those mistakes are done on purpose, but they also look natural. So at this stage, the natural looking move of going here is what gets punished. But I think that I'm almost sure that black would have been okay just moving here. No, not even, because the same thing can happen. Yeah, maybe black allows the recapture of the knight and then agrees and then just play normal chess by playing something like this. I don't know. Trying to think. I know it would be an interesting position, but the point is, black just captured the knight. They have to realize that you have to let go of this knight and just play regular chess. Maybe something like this. Again, no. Something like a bit more defensive. Maybe rook to e1, e8. Not sure. I'm going to think about this position. I really didn't think about it too much. I just saw the Greco game. I thought it was fun. And then after the resignation of black, I thought, let's think a bit about the checkmate patterns, and then I was happy to find it. Hope this was an interesting one. Again, it's not a fried liver if your opponent can castle. Don't go for it if your opponent can castle. If your opponent manages to pull off the castling, you're going to be in a worse position. There are better things to play. So maybe as white, let's look at it from this point of view. Let's say you're here, and they play the gioco piano. and you decide to go for d3, after knight to f6, what I would recommend is taking your time, probably castling, or even playing c3 as a preparation for d4 in the future. Those are some of the moves that get played a lot. Another one would be knight to c3. That would prepare for some pressure on d5. Just don't go for this if the castling is possible. They will make you pay for it, for sure. Especially if also this bishop is looking at f2. If this bishop is looking at f2, be ready to deal with this sacrifice if it should happen. Like again, bishop to f2, knight to e4. This is going to be a problem. All these things, of course, d3 changes, but you know, knight can come here. Knight can come here, unless the knight has gone. So keep these calculations in mind. Keep thinking about it, but the most devastating thing is really the castling. Hope it was useful. I'm rambling on. Let's stop. Bye-bye.